Thank you for attending the workshop titled Beyond Symptom Management, Personalized Medicine, and the Hope for Cannabis. I am honored to be here today to share my insights with you and hopefully inspire you in some small way. I want to thank the Scleroderma Foundation for this opportunity as well. Let's get started. My goal in this seminar is to provide a basic understanding of the pros and cons of Western medicine, as well as functional and integrative medicine, as these terms are used very frequently in many of the support groups and online communities, all with very strong opinions on either side. Additionally, I want to introduce the idea of genetic testing from a medical perspective, as well as potential food tests that has been proven effective in autoimmune conditions when many of the generic diet recommendations have failed. Lastly, I want to share the current research involving cannabis, which isn't much and not necessarily specific to scleroderma. So if that is what you are interested in, is the newest, latest, greatest in cannabis, you can always pull this up later and listen to the last 30 minutes or so, but we'll go through that in more detail. But we'll also go through a review of some basic cannabis etiquette, if you may. Overall, I want you to walk away with one thing that you can discuss with your provider to promote wellness in your life. So as a scleroderma patient for over 25 years myself and a clinical pharmacist, my purpose in life is to empower patients to become active members of their healthcare team by providing open-minded education about new advances in medicine to facilitate conversations with your provider to allow you to live your best quality of life. My passion is developing patient-centered treatment options that combine Western and complementary medicine for the best efficacy. And most importantly, I have lived a life as a patient for many years, which has enhanced my clinical teachings with each experience or medical challenge. I have nothing to disclose. I have avoided any type of conflict my entire career so as to provide unbiased education to patients and providers. So the information I provide is for educational purposes only, and I am not providing any type of medical advice. Manifestations and severity of scleroderma may vary greatly among patients, as we've all experienced. And so really a personalized medical management approach is necessary. And all medical decisions, prescription or not, legal or illegal, should be discussed with all your healthcare providers to determine the best options specifically for you. So when we talk about Western medicine is also known as traditional or conventional medicine in the US, which is based on providing treatment options based in evidence-based medicine. So the gold standard being randomized control studies, with the placebo arm being ideal. Oftentimes, placebo is deemed unethical, especially in the setting of an aggressive condition such as scleroderma, where time is of the essence for effective treatment. Western medicine uses these FDA-approved treatments for specific conditions or symptoms, but the approval process takes many years and significant funding from large corporations or donations, such as the Scleroderma Foundation's recent $2.7 million annual research funding for scleroderma-related lung disease research, as well as pediatric scleroderma, which is fantastic news, and also the Scleroderma Research Foundation. With these treatments, we have been able to reduce death rates for stroke, heart failure, cancer, and AIDS, and we have been able to extend the life of many of our scleroderma friends. It is important to add, though, that drug development process has produced many life-saving drugs that are currently being used in scleroderma, as well as many other conditions associated with scleroderma. Western medicine's reimbursement model is time-based, which is improving, but it's time-based currently, where providers see multiple patients per day and are often limited to providing a few recommendations in that small time frame. It is also important to note that the management of clinics and health systems are often ran by non-medical professionals and or strongly influenced by insurance coverage or the insurance companies. I'm sure everyone listening has had a treatment option denied by insurance, which is frustrating for the provider as well. I don't think I need to get into the insurance changes over the years and the exuberant costs associated with maintaining insurance. So we'll leave that for another conversation. Additionally, patients have grown accustomed to a quick fix to their problem in the form of a pill or medication, never realizing that there is often so much more to the problem than one simple cause. Their discussions are often symptom management, with medications being the go-to as the quick answer, and a lifestyle modification noted in their after-visit summary. Many providers have started adding these lifestyle managements to their discussions with patients, but again, time is limited for those visits. So the goal is to provide these recommendations and education to patients in a quick and concise manner. Because Western medicine is evolving and starting to use apps and other technology to track your health in a less time-consuming way, providers are always willing to learn something new and research the possibilities to enhance the care they provide to their patients. Now, I'm known for tackling those difficult questions, and as experiencing the world myself in real time, it is no secret that Big Pharma has received a bad name for a number of greedy and unethical situations that have plagued the industry. That does not include all the drug companies, though. So it is unfair to lump all of Big Pharma as Big Pharma, and looking at each individual company and their contributions to scleroderma and scleroderma research. There have been a number who have taken extraordinary efforts to provide education in a way and to bring patient stories out there. I will not name drop, but I will. I think everybody is very well aware of Project Scleroderma, as well as some of the other projects that are out there. So when it comes to education or information, it's very hard to please everyone. As with any profession, including other types of medical care, including integrative and functional medicine, there can always be a bad seed. So I want everybody to understand that providers are doing the best that they can with the information that they have and the time that they have allotted. And sometimes burnout occurs when providers truly want to help their patients, but feel confined by the restrictions of the system, whether that's their health system that they work for, the insurance companies, the government, etc. So providers choose to go through a grueling process of medical school and residency to make a difference in their patients' lives. The majority of physicians have to decide either fight the system, which can be very draining, or conform. What we currently see is the effects of an archaic medical school system or curriculum in a very real money-based medical environment once they graduate. Ultimately, Western medicine is protocol and symptom-based, using limited treatment options approved by the FDA, which often have a huge lag time before it can be approved for patient use. So functional medicine focuses on identifying and treating the root cause of the disease rather than the symptoms alone. So it's getting down to the heart of the problem or addressing the issues that are much, much deeper, that have a lot of downward cascade events that occur, that those are the symptoms that you feel. Oftentimes there are multiple reasons someone has inflammation. So a very detailed medical history is taken and extensive testing occurs to determine your specific triggers, which may or may not include poor nutrition, stress, toxins, allergens, co-infections, genetic predisposition, your microbiome, and your GI integrity. As patients, we want to point to one cause in order to have a simple solution, but this is often not an effective treatment plan. So this patient-centered approach requires a deep dive into every aspect of your life. Your diet being the biggest component, as all health begins in the GI tract, but also sleep hygiene, stress management, your lifestyle, your mental and emotional stressors, just to name a few. So there are multiple factors involved in your life, and it takes time to tease that out. There is no quick fix to a lifelong history of you and who you are at the core. This takes vulnerability and time, which can be incredibly challenging. The testing is very extensive to try to determine the causes of your current state of living, and oftentimes it's not covered on insurance, although this is changing. So we are working towards getting these covered on insurance, but it is still a work in progress. This testing can help determine the specific route to take on your journey to wellness, with some quick fixes, such as addressing genetic deficiencies through high quality supplements. There are many other inflammatory processes that takes years and significant effort on your part to correct, such as a full dietary change that can take months to years. And I know that we've all tried in some form or fashion, but I'm here to give you some tips and tricks, potentially some testing that may help lead you in the right direction. So overall, this process is very time consuming and draining, as I've been on this exact journey myself over the past year, which we'll talk about more in that in a minute. The reimbursement model can either be a large sum up front out of your pocket, monthly fees, again, out of your pocket, or per visit fees. But since functional medicine providers often choose not to accept insurance, which for a lot of different reasons, but some being low reimbursement rates, requirements that are necessary to get paid, and all of the hoops that you have to jump through in order to get paid by the insurance company. So ultimately, it is the responsibility of you, the patient, to pay for their time, overhead, so on and so forth. Another way that they can reduce the cost to you directly is by receiving a kickback from supplements and medications they prescribe, since, quote unquote, somebody is going to make the money on it one way or the other. So if somebody's going to make the money on it, i.e. Amazon or wherever else you buy your supplements, then at least that money can go into the doctor's pockets versus Amazon's pockets, and very your total cost out of pocket, because you got to buy the supplements regardless. But ethically, this is one very difficult aspect for me to justify as a provider. So again, it's the comfort level of the provider and ultimately how they get paid. So integrative medicine is really a combination of Western medicine and other complementary medical approaches. Complementary medical approaches may include acupuncture, aromatherapy, massage, meditation, music and animal therapy, psychotherapy, supplements, and other high quality scientific evidence treatment options that are effective and safe. The National Center for Complementary and Integrative Health, which is a division of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, describes complementary as a non-mainstream approach used together with conventional medicine. So this is in the exact opposite of alternative, whereas alternative is instead of. So integrative medicine is complementary, so everybody working together. And integrative medicine is a model of healing based on mind, body, and spirit, involving all aspects of your life and meeting you where you are at. So whole person health, as defined by the National Institutes of Health, refers to helping individuals improve and restore their health in multiple interconnected domains, like biologic, behavioral, environmental, social, for instance, rather than just treating the disease. So this model incorporates the best parts of Western medicine, as using all the treatment options in their toolbox, including medications that can be life-saving for scleroderma patients, and functional medicine to help determine the root cause and correct the genetic deficiencies to the best of our ability, all while encouraging you to make these necessary changes with your diet and lifestyle in order to achieve and maintain an optimal level of health. There are providers who have been Western trained and choose to obtain further education and/or certification for these integrative approaches. They do not mass advertise, nor do they promote themselves, as they are usually individual providers who just want to help patients with their knowledge and can only handle so many patients per day. So their heart and soul is involved in helping those patients, not necessarily building a business based on that. And it's always not the most lucrative. And so most of the providers that you find online, their whole business model is a lucrative approach. So trying to get as many patients as possible with a large fee up front, like we discussed. So you can find a lot of these providers who are covered by your insurance by asking other providers within your system to ask to see if somebody is providing functional medicine as well, or who is functionally medicine trained. So that's not necessarily the goal of a health system most often, but it is a new and novel approach that doctors are getting more education in. And then review that provider's profile to verify that they do believe in integrative medicine, so they're willing to take on the medications that you're currently using and cooperate with your current providers. As we've all experienced, too many cooks in the kitchen can make it quite confusing and chaotic. So it takes time to develop that very special team. And that it has to be a very clear distinction in the past, or there has been a very clear distinction in the past regarding functional medicine or Western medicine. But these opinions are changing. So this integrative approach really is becoming more and more popular in the medical system. So it is my goal as a provider, as well as a scleroderma patient, to help find and facilitate ways to bring this extensive testing and education to Western medicine, while encouraging insurance to pay for it as a long-term investment towards better health, therefore less money they pay further down the line. And the entire time, your health is improving. So we can effectively use medications to help control symptoms while we work on improving the diet and lifestyle, which we often know takes time. So we can work on diet, lifestyle, and all of the underlying causes at the same time while still being on your medications. And then once the underlying causes can be minimized, the need for medication naturally decreases. So it sounds like common sense, but this is something that can be incredibly helpful for patients, as I've experienced myself, as well as many, many others, testimonials online. So the question is always, how do I live a life of scleroderma without medications and without progression? And this is one of those ways to do that. So genetic testing has evolved beyond just your ancestry, and it's now advanced into a medical realm that allows for a better understanding of your body, how it will respond to stress and co-infections, as well as provide recommendations on how to better provide for your body specifically, rather than a protocol that indicates what is normal. So genetic testing can help determine how prone you are to inflammation, specific supplements needed for your body, diet to address these deficiencies, as well as lifestyle modifications, like really how important is meditation to your body, which I find very fascinating. And then what exercise can be the most effective for you, as well as further testing that can be done based on your genes, what your genes have indicated as potential risks. So I am currently working with Toolbox Genomics to create a panel specific to scleroderma to better determine your risk for lung and renal diseases. The faster progressing types of scleroderma, and hopefully to help predict that rate of progression in a way that is using the information from other professionals, such as Maureen Mays and others who have done extensive genetic research on scleroderma. So it's using that information and drawing your DNA to get that data, which can be incredibly helpful to the Western world as well. So I'm hoping to be able to educate Western providers on this as well, in order to maximize the use of these tests to better determine your specific treatment plan. So overall, this gives us a great idea of really where you stand genetically and what can be done about it to make that journey as smooth as possible. And it could be something as simple as a methylation issue, just meaning you need to take a different vitamin because the vitamin that you're taking, your body cannot methylate it into the active form. So if you cannot methylate into an active form, then all of those vitamins that you're taking that need to be methylated, your body is just eliminating without using them. So it could be something basic as that. And oftentimes that particular syndrome or genetic deficiency often has very similar side effects, including pain and fatigue as scleroderma. So it is rather interesting if that's something we can solve rather quickly by the change of a vitamin. It would be very beneficial to do so. And diet. I know. I get it. We're talking about diet again. It is the hardest, most important part of the process. The goal of any dietary change is to determine what your body is responding to and either decrease it or avoid that particular food or compound. Many have heard of the elimination diet, which eliminates foods that you think may be a trigger. Often soy, dairy, wheat, gluten, nightshades, etc. We've all heard of that. And you eliminate those for 2 to 3 weeks and then reintroduce one at a time to determine if your physical symptoms, such as rashes, skin changes, joint pain, headaches, fatigue, GI symptoms, etc., whether those physical symptoms occur. So the overall process is said to take 5 to 6 weeks, but that's assuming that you have identified your triggers appropriately, and that's in the most ideal situation. So the other diet that's talked about most frequently is the anti-inflammatory diet. So that consists of eliminating inflammatory producing foods, such as refined carbohydrates, so bread and pastries, our favorites, French fried and other fried foods, soda, my personal favorite, if y'all know me, which I have successfully eliminated, so that it can be done, I promise, after 40 plus years. And then other sugar sweetened beverages, red meat, red or processed meat in general, and then margarine, and then eating more anti-inflammatory foods such as tomatoes. Again, nightshades, are they inflammatory, anti-inflammatory? We're not going to have that discussion right here. But also green leafy vegetables, olive oil, nuts, fatty fish, and fruits. So I propose doing a test that's available for the LEAP Immunocom diet, which is a mediator release testing. So it's the most furthest downstream effect of your body. And that is what exactly is your body creating inflammation to. And so it's your specific immune response to 170 different foods and chemicals associated with food. And it's clinically proven to improve migraines, IBS, and fibromyalgia currently. But again, further testing is very difficult. So we use it in a lot of clinical settings and have had great clinical evidence for that, not just scientific based evidence. So unlike IgE-mediated food allergies, which is what we know as like the peanut allergy, whereas the allergic person has an immediate and often life-threatening response like throat closure or anaphylaxis, non-IgE-mediated reactions can take up to 3 days to see symptoms. And then those symptoms are often incredibly vague. So instead of hives and throat closing, we have skin rashes or joint pain, digestive problems, fatigue, headaches, all the normal scleroderma symptoms. So, and including GI symptoms, which again is very common with scleroderma. And these symptoms result from a variety of different inflammatory pathways. And so it takes time to develop. So this test specifically determines what your low, medium, and high reactive foods are. And the diet starts off with a very low, your low reactive foods, and you avoid your moderately reactive foods for 3 months, and then your highly reactive foods for 6 months. And then slowly build up that diet and add more foods that are a higher reactivity once your body has calmed down initially. So this allows you to reset the immune system or reset the GI tract in order to, when you do retest that food, you can find the food that creates that symptom that you do not want. And then that will tell you which foods to avoid or to eliminate, so on and so forth. But it gives you more of a cause and effect rather than that 3 or 4 day waiting period and that accumulation effect. So it is often important to note also that these reactions are dose dependent. So it's important to find a certified LEAP dietitian in order to give you good, accurate advice. Because as personal experience, the dietitian that I was working with was not certified and made my journey very, very difficult because she couldn't answer the complexities of scleroderma associated with it. But I have been reassured that the LEAP certified dietitians are able to communicate and to help you through these, through these dietary changes when it doesn't follow the prescribed diet, which oftentimes our bodies don't respond as expected. So to find a dietitian, that website is there as well. So, how does a Western trained pharmacist who has experienced scleroderma for over 25 years determine that integrative medicine is the appropriate approach for her? I'll tell you that I've had challenges in the past with scleroderma, and many short life expectancies were given throughout life based on the available research. So I was supposed to be dead multiple times, through various, data that was available. And I defied all of those, whether that was because I was a child when diagnosed or just determined not to let anyone or anything determine my life. I had lived life to the fullest, running on all cylinders my entire life. Life in the fast lane. And for those who know me know how painfully accurate that is. But I never realized that I was taking the most precious aspect of life for granted, which was my health. Sure, I followed up with my rheumatologist and other physicians as prescribed. For the most part, as patients, we do the best that we can. But my body's natural reserves were starting to run out. They call it the women 40 to 50 issues. So, that's when your hormone levels change and your reserves decrease significantly. So oftentimes that's where women find that they crash. And that is also about the time scleroderma starts developing in many patients. So my natural reserves decreased, which resulted in this drastic decrease in my energy level and increase in physical symptoms, making day-to-day functioning very difficult, whereas I've been functioning okay for many, many years. So after a failed attempt at azathioprine with Western medicine, I knew there was so much more to the picture than just scleroderma or lupus. So this started my journey into the world of integrative medicine. And through testing, I discovered that my genes were naturally higher in inflammation. I was deficient in many key players, minerals, and vitamins that were necessary for the immune system. And that the years of living life to the fullest had caught up to me in the form of many layers or causes for inflammation in my body. So this layered approach has taken years to develop. So I began to settle into the idea that this was going to be a very long uphill battle, if you may. I had medical toxicities, multiple co-infections with Lyme and mold, a horrible GI tract, possibly due to an American diet of processed food and high in sugar. But the brain fog had peaked to the point that I couldn't navigate a basic website. And y'all know me, I've spoken for multiple years. That was a huge, drastic change and something that really scared me, to be honest. And ultimately, through all of this, the medical team that I had chosen, that dietitian, had chosen to abandon me because I couldn't make all those dietary changes in just a few weeks. So, my friends, I tell you this to show you that there is hope, even when hope didn't seem feasible. After an 80% diet change, not even 100%, all of my GI symptoms have disappeared. So no GI pain, no abdominal symptoms, no distension, no IBS, and no acid reflux, which I've had that pretty much my entire life. I've only eradicated about 30% of the mold, but I've regained my mental functions and I've been able to be more active with less joint pain, although I still have a long road ahead. as much as I was a skeptic towards the diet and really how much the diet contributes for over 10 years, it was well worth the effort. And it wasn't all or nothing. I know when I can cheat. If there is interest, I can consider doing an educational seminar on just the diet or genetic testing at a later date. If you want to speak to the Scleroderma Foundation, they can facilitate that if you'd prefer, to get more information on that. So the cup analogy associated with inflammation. So imagine a cup as your body, or you as your body. So your cup is filled up to a certain level based on your genetic predisposition or how well or not your body responds to inflammation. So for me, my body responds horribly to inflammation. It overreacts to inflammation. So my cup level is actually pretty high, naturally speaking. And so then you add on the past history, so co-infections, the mold and the Lyme, and that adds to the cup level. And then you look at diet, and diet is a big component of that. And like we said, it is accumulative with that. So with that diet level, then there's also the stress on top, and then poor sleep. So when you add all of those factors up, you will see that once your cup flows over, that's when you start seeing symptoms. But you don't know how much of that contributed to the poor sleep or to your inflammatory level. So it is very hard to tease out. And so my goal in showing you this is to let you know that it is very multifactorial. And so once your cup overflows, that's when you get those symptoms. So it's time to work on the inflammatory responses that we know we can target and decrease the level in your cup so that it overflows less. So, or less often, and then giving you still some leeway room to cheat, I guess, including, you know, those stressors in life that you can't predict or you can do nothing about, but also other scleroderma symptoms and so on and so forth, so that you can still live a pretty healthy and productive life. So the practicality, your health is the most important investment you can make. And let's face it, we already spend so much money on current medical treatments. So looking at, we discussed the pros and cons of each cost, and then looking at functional providers. There's a website here to find those functional providers that are certified in functional medicine. And then you can research that with what system they're in, and then ask your insurance company who is covered, you know, combine those two lists to find who is covered on your insurance and also functionally medicine trained. And then you look at that provider's profile to determine if their ideas match yours, meaning, do you want to go fully functional medicine and no Western medicine, which is an option, but also can be, you know, it's not an option for those who are rapidly progressing, or it makes it very difficult and plays a gamble that I'm not willing to do for my patients. So, and there is also a group of functionally trained pharmacists at pharm-to-table.life. Fantastic group of pharmacists that are licensed in each state to provide you that assistance from a pharmacist standpoint. And oftentimes they can bill your insurance as well from a medication therapy management standpoint. So that is also an additional option. So the last half of this conversation, we're going to talk about cannabis and how incredibly popular cannabis is. If you really want the full detailed approach and the ins and outs of how to use cannabis and what to watch out for, that is in a talk I did last year. So feel free to pull that up on YouTube by just Googling cannabis and scleroderma with the Scleroderma Foundation, and it will pull up. So I'm not going to go through that again. I am going to go through the promising new mechanisms associated with scleroderma that cannabis may be able to help with. And we will discuss that all cannabis is not created equal. And then a little bit on the FDA process, and then what do we do in the meantime, as well as with all medications, there is no miracle pill. So I want, if there is no other takeaway, there is no magic. I would love to decrease your symptoms and find something that works for you, but also looking at the long-term effects that can occur. So really, are you robbing Peter to pay Paul with your health? These are all things that you have to consider when you choose to start dabbling in cannabis. So we'll talk about the endocannabinoid system very quickly. So it was discovered in the 1990s, and it moderates dopamine. So dopamine is that feel-good chemical, but it maintains the skin cell function, and then making sure that everything is balanced in your metabolic processes. And so there's different receptors that they work on. So CB1 and CB2 receptors. CB1 receptors decrease excitatory neuron transmission and smooth muscle vasodilation, which we'll see here in a minute, that can be counterproductive in scleroderma, and decrease inflammation, which can be beneficial. They are also the most psychotropic, so, and profibrotic. So that's what we want to avoid, is that profibrotic aspect of CB1 receptor agonists. So CB1 can be an effective treatment for Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and other type neurological conditions. But for scleroderma in particular, we're looking at CB2 receptor agonists because it modulates the immune system, decreases cell proliferation, and decreases inflammation, as well as it stimulates regulatory T cells. So allows for your immune system to work more effectively. And we do know that those receptors are in fibroblasts, which we know are important, muscle cells, as well as endothelial cells, along with the immune system. So this is that treatment option that we're talking about for scleroderma in particular. Now, THC, so cannabis includes a broad array of both THC and CBD type products. So they are different in the sense of they work differently in different areas. So THC does not equal CBD. So CBD in particular can differentially modulate CB1. So we can use some benefits of CB1 and signal CB2 receptors by down-regulating the former while amplifying the latter. So that's the benefit of CBD in particular. But higher CBD strains are not currently used in research as of yet. So that's how we talked about that the FDA approval process is incredibly slow and a long run, it takes a long time. And there's a lot of restrictions on what we can use in research. So the higher CBD strains are not approved currently. So again, finding an FDA approved product for this generally is limited to big pharma, and as we'll go through that, but we've seen that some of those have failed as well. They haven't shown the efficacy that we want. So we do know that CB1 and CB2 receptors are overexpressed in scleroderma fibroblasts. So the endocannabinoid system appears to be changed in scleroderma. So it is also important to note here that genetic variability is incredibly important with how your body breaks down THC and CBD, and the polymorphisms that can occur with this. So not every body is created equal when it comes to the use of these products. So what you can do in the meantime, before FDA approval, now granted, I will go through that as well, but beta-caryophyllene is the common botanical compound found in cannabis, and it's also found in bitter greens and black pepper, oregano, and cinnamon. So this beta-caryophyllene is an aromatic terpene that selectively activates CB2 receptors without activating CB1. So there is hope in that. So making those small dietary changes may be beneficial without causing harm. And then, so, we're talking about the new promising meds. Honestly, nothing new has happened since COVID. So Linabulum continues to be used for other inflammatory conditions like scleroderma, lupus and dermatomyositis. But the scleroderma arm of the study was discontinued in December of 2020. So it did not prove to be as efficacious as we need it to be. EHP 101 from Emerald Health is now in phase 2 of clinical trials, which it looks at efficacy with scleroderma. And it is promising with their anti-inflammatory and anti-fibrotic effects, as well as recovering the damaged blood vessels and reduced skin thickness in mice. But ultimately, it's still years off from approval. So the other point of this slide is to mention all of the different mechanisms of action right next to the product name there. It goes to show that we have a lot of different options that are targets that we can use for cannabis that can be very, very promising for scleroderma. So the new research, again, like we said, there's not a whole lot out there. They did find a positive effect with cannabis sativa. And from my previous talk, you'll know sativa is the alert awakening one in skin cells and using hydrogel products and the properties associated with those. So it may actually reduce oxidative stress in those skin cells. And then another one is the potential benefits for cannabinoids in preventing the spread of leukocytes while inducing cell death. So this may reduce the production of cytokines, which increase inflammation. So they concluded that cannabinoids in general have an anti-fibrotic effect in cases of scleroderma. So it is incredibly positive. And then the last one is also endocannabinoids also interact with the PPAR gamma receptors via direct and indirect signaling pathways. So that activate, so PPAR gamma mediates major biological functions such as neuroprotection, anti-inflammatory, and analgesic action, so decreasing pain. So there are many, many other receptors or mechanisms of action that can be very beneficial with scleroderma. We just haven't seen it yet because it hasn't gone through the process. So there is hope in this, I promise, my friends. So with cannabinoids, it is very important to note it is a plant science and it is adaptable. So there's genetic engineering, there's breeding, and that creates many, many different versions. But the concern is most often the US products are all bred to be very high in THC. So with cannabinoids in general, there's 568 unique molecules. That's a lot. And in the FDA approval process, they want to trim that down to 1 or 2. They want to limit that and make sure they can reproduce that each time, which is very difficult with plant science. So there are 120 different cannabinoids in general, and they all work on the endocannabinoid system, whether that's CBD, and again, CBD is for pain and inflammation with no euphoria, or the delta-9 THC, or traditionally called marijuana, for the psychoactive cannabinoid, which decreases nausea and increases appetite, just to name a few. So there are a million other molecules. So you have CBA, CBG, CBN. So if you look along that dial, there's a lot of different compounds. So a lot of different places that we can research, but it's kind of like, where do we start and what's going to be the most promising? If you're going to invest millions of dollars into a drug, you want to make sure that you're picking the right one. And then there's also other molecules such as terpenes and flavonoids, like we talked about with the aromatic terpenes in the black pepper and cinnamon. There's other things that need to be taken into consideration too. So terpenes are also active physiologically through scent, which is that smell of marijuana that you get, activating another class of neurotransmitters called GABA and glutamate. So most of the terpenes are sedating and act on the same receptors as cannabis, like we talked about. And then the terpene from lemons has an antimicrobial property. So it is a full, so the whole plant is classified as full spectrum. That includes a lot of different cannabinoids. So it will respond to your body differently. And then again, just the tip of the iceberg, if you look at all these membrane receptors, those are all more targets that we can use for scleroderma research with cannabis. And there was a question brought to my attention. Thank you, you know who you guys are. Delta H THC is supposed to be less psychotropic in activity, so less euphoria and therefore less addicting. And it's an analog or a cousin to Delta 9 THC. And if you look at the bottom there, it just has a different tail on it. And it binds specifically to CB1. So as we talked about, CB1 is the one that we want to avoid in scleroderma. So I personally would not recommend using Delta 8 THC. And I would stick to CBD products. That's my recommendation. Generally speaking, but always speak to your provider, because by no means am I telling you to run out and buy cannabis. And then the legal aspect, some states are making Delta 8 legal because it is less psychotropic, but it doesn't make it any more safe for scleroderma patients. So these are the prescription products that have been around forever, used for other indications, but nothing specifically for scleroderma. Some scleroderma patients have been able to get dronabinol or Marinol approved by their insurance. But I will tell you that if you've smoked it, and the likelihood of you getting effect from dronabinol or Marinol is decreased. So that's what we found in cancer research. And then CBD, the reason I recommend CBD over THC is it does reduce inflammation, has an antioxidant effect, decreases IBS symptoms, and it has that CB2 activity. So now THC, something that it is beneficial for is its anti-anxiety and sleep aid. So there's pros and cons to that, but again, having that conversation with your provider is the best. And then side effects. With CBD, you get nausea, fatigue, and anxiety as a possibility. And then THC, you really can get hyperemesis and dry mouth. Believe me, my friends, that is real. If you get that side effect, that really is, in my opinion, from a scleroderma patient, absolutely horrible. And then, anxiety also. But the big thing with THC that I find most concerning is the vasodilation to your core. So it dilates those blood vessels, but it constricts your fingers, and again, causing more Raynaud's for some patients. And then there's always that conversation of withdrawal symptoms and whether it is an addiction risk. So remember, there is always that risk of addiction or your body physically becoming dependent to that. There are also many risks to THC, so worsening pre-existing heart disease, reduction in lung function. So by no means do I ever recommend inhaling it or vaping it, because all of that is a stressor to your lungs in general. And there can be a neurotoxic effect associated with that in children in particular. But the question is there really neurotoxic effects as an adult if you use it long-term over many years and at high doses? And then the most common emergency really is a panic attack. And then always considering increasing psychosis, or if you already have mental illness, probably best to not include THC in your regimen, because some of these symptoms are irreversible. And then hyperemesis and cyclic vomiting really can occur with THC, and I have seen it multiple times in clinic. And ultimately, one more comment on this one. Remember, marijuana is a plant and they all work together. So just like any medicine, your body weight, metabolism, and composition will help determine your personalized dose and which products to use. So the drug interactions, There is only a limited available set of data, which we've used on those drugs that have been approved by FDA. We do know that there is a CNS depressant effects, which can be made worse with sleep aids such as benzodiazepines, alcohol, and opioids. And then possible mania associated with THC and SSRIs, or serotonin selective reuptake inhibitors such as Zoloft or Paxil, Prozac. There is increased risk of tachycardia and delirium, as well as risk of immunosuppression with corticosteroids. So that's one thing we want to avoid. So something to watch out for, and then always watch for decreased efficacy in your antipsychotics. So CYP3A4 and CYP2C19 are these enzymes necessary for metabolism for THC. And then CBD, it's CYP3A4 and 2C19. Those can all be competitive, and they can cause drug interactions with some of your medications. So it's best to get that looked at by some of your providers. If you want more details, there is more in that other talk. So the safety concerns are there's a lack of transparency to the end users. So the pricing is usually based off of THC, and the higher THC is what's preferred, even though it's not medically preferred. And then you don't get all the information on what happens with that in the entire process. So how is it grown? What does the soil look like? How is it extracted? What's used to extract it? And those are all more chemicals that may add to your body that you need to get rid of later. That can accumulate and fill your cup up more. So extensive lab testing is required, and I do recommend that for any product that you're going to use. That looks at the analysis of specific cannabinoids and terpenes that are in that compound, pesticides and mycotoxins, any other growth, so like E. coli, kind of gross, but happens, Salmonella, Aspergillus. So again, these are things that are just going to add to your overall burden and more to fight off, as well as yeast and heavy metals, so all of which are bad. And then again, never recommend vaping, more because of the metal that's in the pen, increased risk of lung disease and infections, as well as the plasticizers that are used. So none of those are healthy for your lungs. So a few important tips before we go. Below 18 years of age, there is significant concerns for THC and the neurotoxicity that can be associated with that. Try CBD first. THC is often more difficult to tolerate and may require microdosing. Verify the quality and purity of your product by independent testing. So make sure that that company can provide you with that testing sheet. Know the side effects of THC can be anxiety and nausea, even though that sounds counterintuitive. And then communicate with all your providers, including psychiatry, primary care, and rheumatology. So if you currently have drug abuse, best to avoid cannabis in general. All the state laws, review them very carefully because each state is completely different. For example, oil and edibles are a felony charge here in Minnesota, just for your own knowledge. So those are hidden in those laws. So you want to know exactly what you're getting into. You cannot travel between state lines. And then air travel and sea travel are also incredibly difficult and can lead you into a lot of legal trouble. And it is a medication, so don't share it, sell it, give it away, so on and so forth. And again, the goal is to wean off other medications by using cannabis rather than adding just another compound. So vaping and smoking not recommended. Once again, I will say that as many times as I need for that to sink in. And then genetics do play a role in metabolism as well as drug interactions. So in conclusion, every scleroderma patient's body is completely different. And what constitutes your inflammatory levels and what fills up your cup are all different. So testing can help guide the health action plan, including genetic and food responses. And then integrative medicine can be utilized to make use of all proven technologies to develop that health plan using both Western medicine while you work on the more complex changes in your life. like lifestyle, diet, and genetic modifications. Some changes are easy, while others are very, very difficult and take years, but may as well start with the low-hanging fruit with the potential of genetic testing. Many providers are trained in Western and functional medicine, increasing the possibility that they're covered on your insurance. But understand and accept their business model. How do they get paid? And are you okay with that? Or do you feel that there's a conflict? And then as far as cannabis, with the cannabis research, there is a lot of promising new mechanisms of action that can be used for scleroderma research with cannabis. And then Delta 8 THC is not recommended for scleroderma patients. As with any medication, you start low and go slow, and it can take months to find an effective dose. Start with CBD first, and then look at various state laws, use products that have third-party testing, and then make sure that you discuss with your providers all the potential risks and benefits to you personally, and then weigh out the pros and cons. The goal is to minimize substances needed rather than just adding another to the list. And there is no magic pill. So lifestyle management with an integrative approach, focusing on wellness, is highly recommended. So go forth, be an active member of your healthcare team, and I can be available for other questions if necessary. And I will be available for further talks if that's something that interests you. I greatly appreciate all your time today, and I'm looking forward to speaking with you again in the future.